Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Thursday, March 4th, 2021. The time is 4 p.m. and I would like to call to order the Committee of the Whole, the continuance of our 2021 budget hearings. The first item on the agenda is the chairperson's roll call. I'm Basha Adamczak, 7th Ward City Councilwoman. I'll be serving as chair, and I'll go ahead and name everybody in the meeting. Councilwoman Lauren McNally, Councilman Julius Oliver, Valencia Mero, Chuck Shasho, Kyle Mizak, Councilman Samantha Turner, Jennifer Ozinger, Rick Deek, Mike Durkin, and Nikki Posterly. The next item on the agenda is the 2021 budget reviews, and the first person will be Chuck Shasho speaking about the $5 auto license fund. And Chuck, if we could kind of follow a similar, I guess, pattern like we did last time, if you just want to, briefly go over the budget, speak of anything that is, differing maybe from last year that needs to be brought to our attention, and then we'll go ahead and ask any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, through the chair. This budget's a little bit different in the sense there's really only two line items. There's infrastructure and professional services. This project is where Kyle, I think, generally likes to start every year because these are obligations that we have in relation to our capital projects. So it does change every year. Generally speaking, I have an idea where I want to be, and we budget our projects and create our projects and put them in specific years accordingly. So I'm not sure how you wanted to proceed with this. If you wanted me to just briefly outline some projects that are on tap for this year and where that money's going.
Sure,
yeah.
that would be good. Thank you.
All right, I always start with resurfacing. Our local resurfacing program is the program where we bid out all of our local roads. Generally, those are the local streets, residential areas. We get input from council members. We work with each one of you to determine those lists. Right now, we're budgeting as you saw in the legislation, you already had the legislation came before you, 1.1 million for infrastructure, and we'll have about 70 or 80,000 in inspection, testing, and so forth for the contract. I would, we have a schedule. I think everyone got, the schedule where we want to stick to. It's long been a goal of mine to try to get this out as early as possible. We tend to get the best prices when the sooner the project gets out, the better prices we get for the work. After we're done with the budget, if you have any specific questions about the paving program, we can go over that. I'm sure there's going to be some questions on that. So also in our next item is our bridge inspections every year. That's annual. Every year we have to inspect our bridges. Generally it costs about 60 or 70,000. I think I put a little bit extra in this year because I wasn't sure if we were going to have to inspect the dam at McKelvey Lake yet or not. I'm not sure where the schedule is with that project or when that's going to be completed this year. If we'll have to do an annual engineering inspection on that. We have a monthly inspection that we do, but then once a year it requires a PE to do an annual engineering inspection on it, and it's not something anyone, we don't deal with a lot of dams in our department, so it's not anything that any of us here are comfortable with. So we would most likely use the bridge inspection contract to facilitate that if it's needed. If not, we'll not perform it. Okay, we did get funded for the 2021 infrastructure program. Those roads are the roads that we had talked about that legislation has gone through. Most of the stuff we're hearing, you guys have already seen in the form of legislation. That would be Hillman Street, Burlington, Salt Springs Road, those types of roads. I think there's a couple on the east side. I don't see Councilman Hughes here. There is one on there's two on the east side. I think it's I'll pull these up as I'm talking. There's about 5 or 6 streets in that, and there's also 2 traffic signals, one at the intersection of South Avenue and Front Street, and also on the north side on where they're building the VA hospital, and that's Belmont and I think it's Francisco, or there's that big intersection up there. Okay, also those are the types of things we apply for these grants, so we're obligated to provide local matches. So in this particular situation, our local match, we'll be getting back. Our local match is going to be about, our total project is 1.2 million. Our local match is 33% of that. So we have to provide that 33% local match. So we'll be putting in about $400,000 for that. Also, the Fifth Avenue project, we have to still account for that. That's still going on. We have local matches for that. Those are obligations we have. The Smart 2, obviously, we have that's a Federal Highway Department of Transportation grant. Everybody knows about the Smart 2 project. We have obligations for that. McGuffey Williamson, that's a Safe Routes to School program. That's about $25,000 in local match for that. We still have the Mill Creek Connector Trail out there. We have ODOT obligations too. When we get these consent cooperation agreements that come through City Council, we're obligated to provide certain, when it says cooperation on the agreement, that means we're obligated to provide monetary cooperation, and depending upon, that's usually one of the things I take into account. I know approximately what we need in local money every year. And that's one of the ones when we have excessive ODOT projects, sometimes maybe we won't apply for a infrastructure job that this year, because I know if we have $400,000 in ODOT matches, that I usually shoot for about $400,000 or $500,000 in local matches. And if it's taken up by ODOT on our state routes, which is something we need to do, sometimes we won't have an infrastructure job. So in this case, this year it is Mahoning 762. It is going to be Canfield Road from Arden Boulevard up to Glenwood, and then also Market Street from Indianola to Midlothian. So that project will begin construction most likely in the spring of 2022, but that will be what's ODOT's 22 fiscal year, which means we'll have to give them a check for $200,000 probably sometime in late spring in order for them to sell that project. We have another Safe Routes to School project, Mahoning Avenue roadway job. That's getting under design now. We'll have to probably put in about $20,000 out of this year's budget in order to satisfy the contract for the design work for that project. That's basically, it'll be done in 2 phases. Right now we're negotiating with GPD, who was selected as the engineer. We don't have a cost on that yet because we're still in negotiations, but we're budgeting about $20,000 in local funds to satisfy that. They'll be done in 2 phases, from Mahoning Avenue Bridge to Bella Vista, and then from Bella Vista to Meridian. And that construction won't take place until like 2023 or 24, probably right after the traffic signals are done. We also have another big project we have is the Crescent Street Bridge project. We'll be removing the Crescent Street Bridge, and we will also be doing a roadway rehab around that whole business park. They call that the Riverbend Business Park. That will take place this summer as well. The Crescent Street Bridge project removal is already out for bid. That's actually our first bid that we did with our online process. So. And we also have a project that is in its infancy. It's really a conception right now. Border Control just approved the contract today with MS Consultants for a streetscape project on Walnut Street and Boardman Street by Eastern Gateway. So the concept of the project is between Federal Street and Front Street, and up, including some steps going up to Chauvin, as well as Boardman Street from Walnut to Champion. So basically that half of the block around Eastern Gateway. Of course, the Bill grant will take care of the other block, and then the last one we'll do will be the block on Champion Street there. So that project right now, we have MS under contract to provide conceptual drawings, basically a concept that ties in with a particular budget that we have, about 1.6 million. In addition to that is to assist us with funding grant applications to secure the funding. Right now, we're proceeding with the project where we'll have probably minimal local funds in that project if the grants come through like we hope they do. That we're confident they will. That's going to be a successful project. So it's in its infant stages. I will keep everyone abreast. I'm sure there will be public meetings. Councilman Oliver, I will definitely keep you abreast, and then it's in your ward as we go through that process. Also, we have the Mahoning River Dam removals. It's kind of a odd project that doesn't really fit in anywhere. It's so we put it in under the roadway, basically general fund project in there right now. We have money from the EPA, but we are going to need some money to secure some project sponsorship facilities, and it has to be outside the city. We're looking at multiple entities, City of Akron, City of Warren, to try to. We need a sponsor for the EPA. So we're going to have to work with a different government agency to get that done. So we do have some funding in for that. So all in all, our project totals for our infrastructure right now, I have about 5.1 million, and this that's a little bit different than I think. What the budget we have is a little bit higher. We have some contingency built in there that we always use, and then our professional service is about $120,000 to $130,000. I'm sorry, our professional services is going to be probably about $650,000. That's a pretty brief. I know there's maybe questions on a lot of these projects. The projects that I mentioned are all projects that you've seen before through legislation that I've explained multiple times throughout the process. I know you guys have a lot going on, but if you have any questions on these projects I just talked about, or the budget in general about what happens with our $5 auto license, myself or Kyle will be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chuck. I see that Lauren has a question. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the numbers that are presented here. The 2020 actual expenses in both professional services and infrastructure are significantly lower than what council allocated or budgeted for last year. So, I mean, why? I feel like this is a department that shouldn't really have that. Were we not able to complete projects? Did something happen?
Well, I mean, projects span multiple years. They're never, just because it's budgeted in 1 year doesn't mean it's going to be physically constructed in 1 year. And I don't know if Kyle, if you want to clarify that, or if you want to jump in.
Through the chair, I'm running a report. As you see that asterisk and look at the sentence down the bottom, this does not show you all the funds that are encumbered. So I'm going to run the report right now to tell you what is encumbered that hasn't been expended at the end of the year that is being spent this year against those two line items. So if you give me a moment, I'll give that answer. So if you want to move on to the next question, once I got it, I will ask to come back and update you.
Okay, thank you. I had a follow-up if
Sure, I just want the record to reflect that Councilman Mike Ray is joining us, but go ahead, Lauren.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so just in the same suit then, it looks like we increased the budget for 2021 under infrastructure, but we decreased the professional services. Can you just talk to those changes so I can understand what's going on there?
That's a great question. Am I on? Yes, thank you. That's a good question. The professional services are for engineering services. So depending upon what we do in-house and what we hire out, it doesn't necessarily going to be proportional every year the same. So if it's a larger project, sometimes it's a more complicated project. We usually assume and figure that inspection on a project is going to be about 10% of the construction costs. But it depends on if it's just a roadway resurfacing project, that the costs are a little bit less. But if it's a complicated project that has more time, that's more hours for an inspector. So sometimes those costs go up. So it just depends upon what type of project it is as to what the cost of engineering is, whether the engineering, if you're doing an ODOT project that may have complicated environmental documents, right-of-way acquisition, that type of stuff. And the ODOT process is a little bit cumbersome to get through more complicated projects. So it requires more time for a consultant. So those costs are a little bit higher sometimes. Now, if there's some project, if it's just a simple paving job, we may do that in-house. So that we won't have we'll have minimal consultant services projects. So we'll have some minor costs for for soils testing and stuff that we just can't do, stuff like that. But generally, the more we do in-house, the less the professional services are going to be. It's just that we only, it's just me, Kadar, and Jordan right now.
So just to stop you on that one then real quick, does that mean that this year, it's not necessarily that you're doing less projects in that line item, it's just that they're different than what they have different requirements than the ones did last year?
Yes, it's very dynamic and it changes year to year depending upon what type of projects that we have. And we unfortunately, I think we've been doing less in-house just because as the projects get more involved and other things get more involved, Kadar's time, Jordan's time is taken up in other items, and myself, I haven't done any design work in probably about 6 or 7 years. I mean, I have no time to do any of that.
Okay, so then can you talk about where the increase is going to in the infrastructure project line item, because we know it's not going to the ward street paving stuff. So can you just tell us where that's going?
For 2021, they're all going in the streets. It just depends on where they're going, I guess.
Right.
Right. I mean, usually my baseline I start with for local resurfacing is about 1.1 million. We have a lot of it depends upon other obligations we have. So we have different obligations every year, depending on what grants we're awarded. We have obligations to meet those local matches. They have to come from somewhere. So sometimes when we have large amounts of local matches, like we do this year, we have to cut back the local resurfacing in order to pay for that. We're still getting lots of infrastructure roads paved. It's just that we're taking different avenues to get there. And frankly, we're making better use of our funds because we're leveraging that money against federal money or state money or whatever.
Yep, thank you. That makes sense then. We have more local matches for grants this year than we did in the past or last year.
Yes, that's what it comes down to.
Okay, so then I'm sorry. I have one more question, Basha. I'm through the chair. One more. Then I know this is money comes into this fund through the $5 auto license. How much are we collecting in a year, and what's sitting in there overall? What's our average collection, or what did we collect last year? And then can you give me some of those baselines, Kyle?
For the chair, I'll answer a few of those because you just asked multiple questions. So,
yep.
First, getting back to encumbrances, there is $1,339,000 in encumbrances in the fund. The professional service line item has an encumbrance of $220,006. The remainder, $1,119,195, is what is still unspent that is encumbered with vendors to pay for services under infrastructure that have not been fulfilled yet as of 12/31. So if you take that total and again, now you're asked what the ending cash balance in the fund is. We ended with a cash balance of $1,832,000. However, you now need to subtract the $1,339,000. So it leaves roughly $500,000. Then when you look at what we budgeted, we're using the budget surplus along with the revenue, and that's why this is fully funded. Now you then ask, the third question was how much revenue was generated by the fund itself in 2020. If you just give me a moment, I will open up and inquire the revenues of that account in 2020. So in 2020, under that fund, revenue, under the motor vehicle permissive tax, we collected $352,000. And that is the amount of money that is generated as income to that fund on its own. So our other sources are grant money that comes through as reimbursement, and then reimbursement from CDA, which is the $750,000 we get each year for paving. And the rest is us subsidizing what we need to transfer from the general fund to meet Chuck's budget obligations that he provides me with a detail of all the different projects. That's what we collected in 2020.
Did you have follow-up, Lauren?
Just because he could probably do math quick. Total expenses, 131. Can you just tell me how much, or that's the difference, sorry. So we're transferring then like 4 million.
This year, I'd have to, let me go tell you exactly what I've got in the budget transferring in this year. 1 second. As the preliminary budget that we have right now, just got to open a file because I didn't have that in front of me. 2021. Transfers. I am transferring 1,150,000.
Okay, then I was really off on my math. If the total budget's 5.7, 700.
No, his budget is right, 5.6. We're relying on surplus and what we have in revenue. I didn't give you 2021's revenue. I gave you what we collected in. You asked what we bring in as a collection, as a revenue for the one revenue that we collect. I gave you what the actual was for. If you'd like me to break down and provide you all the details, I can create a separate document, but you just asked what the one revenue that's collected by the fund brings in. I told you what we brought in last year for revenue. That's what I answered based on your question that you asked.
Correct.
Yeah.
So 750,000 from CDBG, 352 in revenue. And then we were transfer, that's 1.1. And we're only transferring another one. So the remainder is already sitting in there.
No, you also get the funding from the state. We have to expend our money and then they reimburse us. That's us getting the money returned back to us. So when Chuck talks about a project that is going to be 80% reimbursed, we appropriate 100% of it. We then have to make sure that we have enough of our own revenue at the end of the year, make sure the fund's in balance. So they're going to give us 80% of that back. That's going to be a revenue back to the fund because they promised that they were going to fund the project 80%. That's one type of project. There's other ones where there is no funding, meaning we don't pay for it all up front. We have to just provide our portion and they pay the difference. And all we have to do is make our contribution. And that is just an expenditure and there is no offsetting revenue. So again, this is why this particular fund has to be started with first. I have to talk with Chuck to find out which projects he's starting, which projects are ongoing, which projects we haven't finished paying for. And then of those projects, how much money are we going to receive from Eastgate or another party that we may have entered into agreement with, and then balance that between what Chuck expects to spend, and then where are we going to be on each of these projects? Some of these projects don't end on a calendar year. They're ongoing. They may take 2 years. So it's an evolving fund, and that's why I have to make sure I budget for it first, because in years like this, because of the project called Smart 2, we're having to expend $1,043,000, and we're only going to get reimbursed for $494,000. This is an actual document that Chuck shares with me. So in essence, we're underwriting over $600,000 on this one particular project in this particular given year. Smart 2 is going to be, Chuck, how many years? 3?
3 years.
So it is very convoluted, but we always make sure we start with this and we fund it correctly. And we do not try to put more money than what we need, but we have to make sure the money that we need is in there because of our commitments that you guys have agreed through ordinances. So it's to the chair, sorry.
Oh.
Lauren,
Okay, sorry. Okay, so can you then we don't have to go through this tonight, but just provide me with a deeper dive into this, how much, just everything, just a deeper dive, and I could talk to you offline about it, but I'd like to see like our encumbrances, the money coming in that comes into the account, separated out by where it's coming from, and the money that for this year that's encumbered. So how much we owe before we're even starting the year for whatever projects that he has lined up. I want to understand
To the
what's going
chair,
on there
I
a little bit
completely
better.
understand what you're asking. Once, probably after I get the enterprise funds done tomorrow or Monday, I will break that down. And what I'm gonna start with is I'll have to start with 2020, because you need to see what was in the budget, what didn't get finished, and what's in this budget. So yes, I can do that. It's gonna probably be multiple documents that I'm going to share with you, but I can do that, and I can share it with all of you.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. And I guess I'm trying to see how much year over year we're actually, how much are we investing in our streets as another point of, and I know it's a lot and coming from a lot of different places. I just want to know, like, can you go back a couple years just so I can see?
I can go,
and it doesn't have to be with this budget, just something I want to see.
yeah, I mean, and appreciate this. Each year, this thing changes dramatically, other than the 3 fixed projects that he typically has, and that's going to be resurfacing, bridge inspections, and then the infrastructure phase that OPWC does every year.
Okay.
Those are things that are in each year. Then it comes down to the unique individual project streets that, given Eastgate's schedule and given when Chuck and them decide that they're going to tackle some of these projects when we have the funding, then you start to expand on the number of different places that we could be spending funds, which makes 2021 and going forward is the fact that this now Smart 2 program is going to be involved in the next 3 years, which I have to rely on each year on Chuck, because we do not forecast going forward, because the difficulty of knowing that sometimes some of these projects get put on the calendar and then they get postponed, or we find another way. And Chuck, I think you should help them understand this. We then find that somebody's willing to fund what we had already agreed to fund ourselves. And then Chuck is able to change that. And we're able to then subsidize some of our funding with new monies that we didn't have in the budget. Chuck, you got a minute to help them understand how that occurs on occasion?
Yeah, I understand that. I guess here's what I'm ultimately getting to. Let me just put it out there. Over the last handful of years, our street paving for our wards budget has decreased. But 6 years ago or whatever, when we passed the legislation to increase the $5 auto license, it was sold to the public and us as, okay, well, this is actually going to buy us more streets. And I know that we've put money, we've been able to go above and beyond with grant matching and all that stuff, and we've done a great job on that. I need to understand the side of the ward paving, because I need an answer for that. And if we're going to keep going down and down and down over there, because I see other projects coming through, like the SMART grant, that's going to cost us a lot of money and drive a lot of our stuff. And it's a good thing, but it's going to pull from our individual wards money here. And so I gotta be able to understand that fully and make a sound argument there, or figure something else out and not support it because our side streets and our wards aren't, they're not top notch, and our budget at this point, you're getting 4 or 5 streets paved. That's it, out of hundreds in each ward. So that's where I'm sitting and what I'm trying to figure out here.
Okay, through the chair.
Chuck. Oh, and I'm sorry, let the record reflect that Councilman Jimmy Hughes has joined us. Go ahead, Chuck.
Thank you. Through the chair, Councilwoman McNally, when a few years ago, when we increased the auto license plate fees, there's a couple of things going on here. There's a lot going on, but just to kind of briefly explain it, the city, there's no secret that the city is losing residents. They take their cars with them. They take their registration with them. So, by increasing the fees, this is just like a classic example of the, we have a certain amount of infrastructure to maintain, and we have a certain amount of people to pay for it. 40 years ago, we had 120,000 people to pay for it. Now we don't. Now we're down to 50, 60,000. So I guess my point is, like, if we bring in $300,000, Kyle threw out a number of about $300,000 that we brought in through auto license fees. I'm pretty sure we were bringing in about $300,000 when I first started working here. So that was 20 years ago. If we only used that $300,000 for local matches and street resurfacing, you can imagine what we would be getting done. It's virtually nothing. So we, as you know, we supplement from the general fund. Increasing that auto license fee, and if we get additional gas taxes and so forth, any other revenue that goes into that fund only helps us, because then we theoretically would need less money from the general fund to supplement it. So it still has a benefit. And as far as our local street resurfacing, personally, I would like to see our local street resurfacing to be about 3 times the cost that it is now, 3 times the budget. We don't have that luxury. Our street resurfacing program has been the same, plus or minus $100,000 or so, a couple $100,000 since I've started working here. When I started working here, we were paying $87 a cubic yard for asphalt. Now we're paying about $140 a cubic yard for asphalt, and that's a good price. So the price of the materials is going up. Labor is out of the roof. Wages go up, everything. So it costs us more. So just as an example, we used to put down about 10,000 cubic yards of asphalt in our resurfacing program. And I did this analysis for David Skolnick a few years ago. And it just shows that we were putting down 10,000 cubic yards of asphalt back in probably around 2005, 2006. Now we're putting down about 5,000 or 6,000 cubic yards of asphalt. So with this, because our budget hasn't gone up proportional to the cost, and that's a situation that we're just in. And, we try to use that money as wisely as possible to try to take advantage of this funding. When we apply for grants, we need to have money to match that. And believe me, I don't leave any rock unturned. We go in situations where if we're paving let's say for instance, South Avenue a few years ago, I just pulled one out of the year. Let's say if it was $1 million, we are obligated to pay $200,000 for that local match. So then what we'll do is we'll apply to Eastgate for $200,000 for state funding. You can match state funding. You can match federal funding with state funding. So now the city doesn't pay anything. If we didn't do that, that road wouldn't even get paved. I don't even know how we would get the money to pave that road. So we have to be creative, and we have to be cognizant of where our budget is. We have to be, it's a matter of priorities and resourcefulness. And you have to find that balancing act to make the budget work every year. So I would like to see more in resurfacing, but where do you take it from? I guess is my point. We can't not, if we don't want to apply for the grants, we don't need the local grants. We could put all our money in the local roads, but then some of the other roads. Now let's be honest. The build grant, we know it largely benefits downtown, but a strong downtown is important to the city. Now, this particular case was a very specific funding application and a funding avenue that we took advantage of. We're not always going to get that. Generally speaking, we're going to put that money into our arterial routes and our intermediate routes into the city. So that same amount of money would normally go into that. In this particular case, we have an opportunity that we have to take advantage of to use this funding. I'm straying off my topic a little bit, but I don't know if that answered your question, Councilwoman.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it, and I get the like, and you've worked magic, Chuck, with your grant writing and your matching, and you know, you've done seriously large road projects that otherwise would have gone untouched, because you're right. I want to just see it in a numbers perspective. I want to see it in Kyle's perspective, or Kyle's, you know, like he just looks at spreadsheets and sees the numbers coming in. I want to see that side of it. I understand your side of it, Chuck, and
it is different. It is different every year.
Yeah.
Just depends on how projects.
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. I mean, I could think of a few places that we could take the money from and add to your budget, but I'll leave that for another conversation.
Councilwoman Turner had her hand up. Samantha.
Thank you. Chuck, of the projects you've listed, which can we expect to be completed here in 2021?
Let me go back to my list here. In 2021, Fifth Avenue will be completed. Resurfacing obviously will be completed. I'm not going to talk about bridge inspection. The safe routes to school, McGuffey Williamson will be completed. The Mill Creek Connector Trail will be completed. Crescent Street will be completed this year, and possibly 2021 infrastructure, with the exception of the traffic signals.
Okay, great.
Should be completed this year. And sorry while it's on my mind, just so everybody knows, the roadways in the 2021 infrastructure are Salt Springs Road, Vestal to Bell Vista, Hillman, Myrtle to Warren, Burlington, Victoria to Belmont, Shehigh, Wilson to Bruce, and Early Road from 422 to East High.
Great.
So
And of those, how much in reimbursements do we stand to collect?
Okay. Cal discussed resurfacing about CDA. There's also some water and waste money in there for their work. The infrastructure program, we should get back about $800,000 for that. I'm not prepared to answer this, what we're going to get back in SMART 2, because it's the most complicated project budget-wise that I've ever done. But I could break that down for you once Kadar comes back. He's off with COVID, or he's off sick right now, but he's okay.
Okay, so
Uh,
Samantha.
Go ahead.
Here's how it breaks down. No, it's a good question, actually. The federal money, the money that we get from what we call STP funds, the money that we get from federal highway, from Eastgate, okay? That money is paid directly to the vendor. So we don't have to put that money up. We got to put a local match up, but sometimes we get that local match for the state. Now the state money, what's called OPWC. So if you see a grant application coming through for Ohio Public Works Commission, they require us to spend the money first and then get the money back. So that's the big ones. That's the big one. We have to expend 1.2 million of that roadway project, and then we get $800,000 back. So that's the big one. Other than that, maybe Crescent Street Bridge has some OPWC money in it. So there'll be, I'm not sure what that number is, but it's not as much. I think there's probably about $600,000 we would have to put up, and then we'll get that back as well. Those are the two big ones that we have to put up.
Great. And my question, if you could, you don't have it with you right now, you can give it to us. How much in reimbursements we collected in 2020 for the projects that were completed during that year? And you can provide that later, but I want to make sure that I'm understanding this. Cal, you pull 1.1 from the surplus to meet this budget?
Through the chair,
Good.
you're asking, you guys are trying to get into the weeds of a complicated diagram. And I will do my best, but to try to answer some of your questions right now when you don't have and you're pulling, what your question was, I will answer it. But please remember, this is why you have professionals doing what we do. And if you'd like to sit down and go detail to detail, you need to make an appointment and come in, because this is a complicated fund. It's not like the police department where the general fund makes a transfer and the general fund income tax. I would love to sit with you and go down detail to detail, but to try to do it through this form where you're asking questions, it's not as easy. And so I'm willing to take the time, come in, and I'll explain it all and do my best to help you understand.
So yes or no, how did you said you had to add 1.1 million. Yes, you pulled it.
What did I had to add 1.1 million. What do you mean I had to add? I'm sorry.
To meet the budget. So you said so when you were going over the numbers, 352 came in from the actual collection.
That was last year's collection.
Right. At last year's collection, you have that, and then 750 will come in from CDA funding.
Yes.
You said you had to transfer 1.1 million.
That's what we have right now planned in the budget, to transfer 1,150,000.
Okay, I'm just asking from where?
The general fund.
Okay, that's it. That's it.
For there's only one way that's a transfer. Right. That's from the general fund.
It's coming from the general fund out of the surplus. Right? No, just because the general fund isn't sitting in the surplus.
Again, it's in the city's general fund budget in 2021. That is a planned transfer of the 19 million. 1,150,000 of that is going to the $5 auto license fund.
Thank you. Chuck, if you could give me those answers as far as the reimbursements in 2020 and what we can expect for reimbursements in 2021, that would be great.
I will.
And then the last question is, just so I understand it, you do use this fund to leverage your grant writing and your projects from the state level. So you have dollars here to leverage your all the projects you need to have. This is why this number fluctuates between what you're actually using, what is actually here.
Yes, because we need that in order. The condition of the grant is we got to put up a certain amount. So
okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Councilman Hughes or Councilman Oliver?
None from Councilman Hughes.
Okay. Any other questions from my colleagues?
Right.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Chuck.
Through the chair, can I just address council for a second? Just for, we'll
Sure.
take, it's about paving. It's on topic. The, our program this year, I'm trying to do something a little bit different here. It's not different, but it's with, like, for instance, our infrastructure program. I want to go through with this project. We're trying to, we're going to pave the roads. We're going to put new street signs up. We're going to put new pavement markings down. This year, I'm trying something new. I want to do the catch basins on the roads. Okay, just because we have a lot of old brick catch basins, and we can use that. Generally speaking, if I do a project for $100,000, and I estimate $100,000 on this infrastructure job, it's probably going to come in at 800,000, 850, maybe 9. So there's always a little bit of extra money in there that we don't use from the state. But if we have that, even if wastewater has to supplement the project by $100,000, if they're going to get 70 catch basins replaced for $100,000, that's a pretty good deal. So we're going to try that this year, and we're going to continue to do that, especially when we're getting federal money, because then we can have more of a bigger bang for the buck. So I would like to, I'm toying with the idea of possibly doing that with our local resurfacing on the residential streets. But in order to do that, and this is where it gets a little crazy, in order to do that, we almost need to know the streets that we're going to pave a year in advance. And I don't know how we're going to do that, because right now we're looking at, we have a, like, we'd like our list back by March 19th so that we can go out for bid, whatever my schedule said, I think it's in April, sometime in mid-April. Now, if we had our streets for the next year, then we can bid a contract directly through wastewater to go through and do those catch basins, so that we're not paving a road and coming back and digging it up and putting a catch basin in after, or we're, incurring costs through wastewater to have these guys brick up these catch basins. When they do these repairs on these catch basins, it's not the ideal situation. We don't really, those brick repairs don't last long. Would much rather put a new catch basin in, and it's a lot cheaper to put it in during a project than it is to hire a contractor to go out by themselves and do it part of a larger project. So it's just something to think about. And I think if we did that, I would probably want to start talking about the 2022 resurfacing program in the fall. And that seems a little weird, but I think it's something we can do. I think if we get the streets, I would like to see it get to a point to pick our streets in the fall instead of the spring, so we have all winter to address other infrastructure issues before we pave it. That might include a water line. I don't know. It's just that we'll have a better chance of doing that if we pick our streets in the fall. So I'm going to try to double up with you guys this year, if you're so inclined and you guys are okay with that.
Just a
Thank you.
direct follow-up, Basha.
Thanks, Basha.
Lauren,
Um,
Lauren had her hand up first. I'm sorry, and then Samantha. Go ahead, Lauren.
Oh, sorry. Chuck, I'm game. Count me in. I think that's an easy thing to do. It's not ridiculous, and I think it's a great idea. That's all.
Like, to follow up with that, there's some council members have a good amount of streets on those lists that I gave you that are out there, that have been sitting on those lists for years, that have been neglected and not paved. I don't know I have no names of people that have done it over the years. And some I do know, I won't mention them, they're a little longer here, but they would just give me new streets every year, and the street list never went smaller because we never got to the old streets. And these people say, well, my street has been on the list for 15 years and it's never been paved. I'm like, well, we try to work together with them, and I always try to whittle some of those streets off the list. And to be fair, there may have been times in the past where we had streets on the list that maybe have already paved or something, but we're working to make those improvements. So just keep that in mind. If you have a lot of streets on the list, really take a good look at them. That's all.
Samantha, and then Mike had his hand up, and then Julius.
No, I was just going to say, I know that, I don't know about anyone else's list, but my list was long, and I just added to the list that I inherited. So I think you could just start there. And also I have a whole list of catch basins, which you have those as well. So I think that could really happen just based off of what we already have in place. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
on
Councilman Ray.
amyloid and diet.
Yes, through the chair, Basha, thank you. Chuck, I'm on board with what my colleagues said. I'd be happy to do the list sooner so we can plan better and plan further out. So thank you, and I'd be happy to work with that.
Thank you. Councilman Oliver.
Yeah, I just want to say likewise, I agree with my colleagues. I know Lauren used to ask a while back all the time about the process of possibly replacing water lines when we resurface. Are we any closer to planning on doing things like that? I know you mentioned it briefly, but is that, in the expected future?
Well, through the chair, I mean, we do work with the water department. They have our street list every year, and but if we had our street list earlier, like I said, if we can put together, I see the mayor just joined the meeting. Hi, Mayor. If we can get our street list for 2022 in the fall of 21, we can work through these infrastructure issues. We have some time, as opposed to being rushed in the spring to get the project out. I can't 100% speak for the water department, but I think generally they know where lines need to be replaced. I think it's just a matter of their budget and their allotment. So, yeah, but we will absolutely work with them.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck. Any other questions? Councilman Hughes.
It's really not a question, is more of the statement. I really got a nightmare of street resurfacing need to do in my ward, and I inherited that. I don't know what process, and was never really trained in what process should be when I first became a council person. But it's just systematically, I can almost do almost all of my streets that hasn't been done in the last 5 to 10 years need to be resurfaced. So I just think that some explosion need to happen. Some 1 year, instead of at the pace we have, we need to generate more money, more towards something as a bigger priority. I understand everything that you went with the costs and everything else, but because the streets are so neglected, the pace we going, even if you want to get 2 years, next year and everything else, it's not going to solve the problems of the streets. To me, it's the number one thing, and close to the number one thing in my ward. If some magic, if we come up with some creativeness, if you applying for grants or if you're applying for this and that, it's out of my streets are gone. It's just so many. I would say, just in guessing, 60%, 70, 80% of my streets need to be resurfaced. Now, and I understand about the water. We get that. I get that a lot. We hold water on the east side, but I erased a ton of streets, and I would bet that my ward has closed down more streets than any other part of the city. I would say that, so we just abandoned the streets altogether, and it's still an epidemic. And we got nothing for that, at least that I know of, in the sense of, hey, you close down all these streets, let's do it. Now, I imagine you might have done it with my predecessors or somebody got something, but the streets are still nowhere near, even 50% need to be done. So just giving you a list of sitting on the list, and I don't know whose fault it's going to be 2 years from now or 4 years from now. If we don't come up with a plan to do more streets and not from the license or whatever the case would be, I don't know. Maybe there's, we need millions of dollars. That's what, millions and millions of dollars to take care of it. But we need an explosion, something, one of these seasons, whether both in the fall and both in the spring, I don't know. But we need something to do more streets than we do. In particular, in the second ward, in part of the first ward that's on the east side.
Thank you, Jimmy. I mean, I agree. I think we do need more streets done in the neighborhoods, and I think we could probably talk about this further in committee as well. And just as a quick comment, I know a few years ago, Councilman Oliver and I attended National League of Cities Conference and came back with information about more sustainable material. So in lieu of, I'm not sure what the lifeline of the streets are, I don't know if it's like 10 years, but they were able to offer a better, you know, product. And we were at that time willing to take less streets for streets that are going to last longer. But like I said, I guess we could talk about that further in committee because we're kind of a little bit off time for our next presenter. So is there anything else directly related to the budget? Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, everyone. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is community planning and economic development with Nikki. So if we could kind of just follow the same format, Nikki, if you would like to go over your budget briefly and, you know, discuss any pertinent information or anything that are majorly differing from last year, and then we'll go ahead and ask questions.
Thank you. Through the chair, in looking over the budget with regard to some of the reductions, I've worked with Kyle on this and I'm satisfied with reductions. Travel costs, we did not do much traveling last year, of course, because of COVID, and we had to find other ways to meet some of those obligations when it comes to trainings and doing them virtually and through webinars. So I am okay with that being a reduction in cost. Professional services as well. We use this for our grant writing services with YSU. Advertising, now that we're using Economic Action Group, we're using them heavily on the advertising side. So that reduction is okay with me. The utilities, rentals, all of this falls in line with what we've spent and is manageable moving forward. The office supplies, we spent more in 2020 than it looks like we were budgeted, but I believe most of that was because of our move from 20 federal. At the end of the year, we had to get, you know, new stationery and everything changed over with our new address and update some things in the office. So that was a change there. Most of my requests, all of my requests are staffing requests. When I started 18 months ago, I had a staff of 8 plus a temp, and now I'm down to 4 and a possible. Possible meaning I have one that's out on medical leave right now, and I don't know what that's going to end up for our department. Some of that is intentional. It's intentional because as the positions are being vacated, what I've been doing is actually physically doing the work myself so that I know what is needed in that department. And so that I know what skill set is needed and I know whether or not we need someone full-time, part-time. So for instance, when our secretary left, I started doing POs and office supplies and invoicing, so much so that Kyle told me to stop because I was messing him up on his end. When our zoning specialist job moved over, well, when we went on furlough, I did zoning. I did permits. I did the BZA and the design review agendas and looking over the cases so that I know what those jobs entail. So the staffing and restructure that I've proposed and that I've submitted is not because it's what I think I need, it's because it's what I actually need to help move this department forward. The staff that I'm requesting is in our community development division. So these positions will be funded through CDBG funds, so they will not impact the general fund. The zoning analyst position that is in the general fund, I do want to replace that position. So I am going to post that. I'm working with civil service right now to update the job description to include the land bank duties that were being done. So that one will be reposted. The housing administrator and CDBG administrator positions will be new positions. And then a secretary position, I do need to fill that position to make sure that I have someone that can fluidly work through all 3 divisions and keep us kind of afloat. So that is all I have.
Thank you. Nikki, any questions? Lauren? Oh,
Sorry, I didn't have myself muted. I guess, so two things. Just your staff went down, but your professional services contracts went up. So that kind of would make sense. So to carry a high professional, even higher professional services budget, but also increase your staff, I need to wrap my head around that.
Through the chair, great point. Thank you. I intentionally did not ask for additional staff in economic development because we created those professional services agreements with Economic Action Group and with Minority Business Outreach to support economic development. So, we can evaluate those contracts annually and see if we want to continue them. But in that case, we are not, just for lack of a better term, stuck with employees that, are now on our master salary and on our payroll that we can't easily dissolve. So the contracts are supporting that economic development. You're right, it's supporting the economic development division. The staff that I'm asking to hire on are in community development.
Lauren, did you have a follow-up?
She might not know how to
I have,
PCC.
Basha, may I?
Yeah, Mike.
Through the chair, I was just wondering, refresh our memory on the CDA and who's funded. Do we see those on here? Does that transfer over? Does that reimburse?
Oh, no,
I'm sorry, Kyle, if
there's
that's
not.
an obvious question. I apologize.
Through the chair, there is no funding of positions in CDA right now that are being funded by CDA. What Nikki has done is she has actually, in essence, shrunk those responsibilities, as she pointed out in her explanation of her budget. And CDA, she's looking to expand that because of the HUD funds that we have available to do those two lines that I've identified at the bottom of the payroll page where you can see the positions. So those would both be CDA funding. So up above, there is nothing in those positions that are being funded any longer from CDA, the top line.
Thank you for that clarification.
Through the chair.
Samantha.
Thank you. Nikki, just for a point of clarity, this budget reflects the addition of a business support, compliance director, and business support for economic development. 2 business support positions and then a compliance director.
Through the chair?
Nikki.
The compliance director position was an unfilled position that we needed to fill last year. We went on contract for that. So what I'm asking for is a CDBG support and a housing to be included. The business support would be the secretary position that I want to be fluid through all divisions that would also assist economic development.
Okay, let me see. All right, so, I'm looking at all of the open positions. I want to make sure that I'm clear. Only in community development division, I'm seeing 2 open positions. Those, your compliance director, you're contracting with that one. So
I'm sorry, through the chair, the compliance director position, we've done a short-term contract for, we did a short-term contract last year. We're filling that one this year.
Okay. And then the business support, which is the secretary position in CDA, is you filling that one this year as well, or plan to?
When you say secretary position, the secretary position I'm asking for, which I'm
looking at your community development division hierarchy you have here. So it has the business support right under Beverly's position that is open as well.
Right, that's the current structure. If you flip back to the proposed restructure in the restructure plan, page 4.
All right, so of these, now I don't know which is.
So what I'm asking for, the business, instead of calling it business support, what this position is going to be is a CDBG administrative support position. We need someone focused on HUD with HUD knowledge.
Okay, so you got the administrative support position, you have your compliance director, those two positions you plan to fill this year in CDA.
And the housing administrator.
And the housing administrator.
Yes.
And then you propose to fill the is that the land utilization position? Is that different or?
That's the zoning analyst that we're adding the land bank duties to.
Okay. So that 2, 3, so we're at four positions that you need to fill in overall.
Yes.
In 2021, right? Or is it?
Chair, Karen was in that position. So that was funded and but she just retired. So there was somebody there in that particular zoning analyst position that's going to change.
Okay. So you'll have, I think I'm counting 5 positions. I just want to make, they're all quantified here in this for you to fill in 2020.
Correct. There's 5 positions.
Okay. And where are you on, and I'm most concerned about the positions related to our HUD funding, because I know there needs to be a separation there. Where are you with filling those positions?
The compliance director position, Jonathan is actually working on posting that one this week. I did get some information through NeoGov that they're starting to post that one. Again, our assistant compliance position, that person is out on medical leave. So I've been filling in there. We did just get a BOC approval to bring Dawn back on for support, Dawn Montero. So she's assisting in that role. Among some other roles, but just assisting because we have this annual action plan right now. So the other 2 positions, the housing, to go with the housing strategy, and the CDBG admin, those will be new positions, but we will still be under our 20% admin cap. I think this brings us only to about 15%, 14 or 15%.
Thank you so much. I just wanted that point of clarity so we know we get what we need so we can continue moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Any other questions? Lauren?
I'm sorry, and not to belabor this, but just so that I'm 100% clear, everything in your proposed restructure plan that we've been talking about for the last year is in this budget?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Nikki. So we will go ahead and move on to environmental sanitation. Mike, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you could go ahead and get started then. Thank you.
All right. Through the chair, thank you all. I pretty much tried to do the best that I could with this. I did work with Kyle. We really crunched some numbers on this because as you can see, and basically a lot of the red is a reduction in what we've tried to reduce some of the things that we have to meet the number. As you know, we were basically, it's about a $2.5 million reduction in this budget, most of which I just reduced our operating services, which most of that money was for demolition that come out of that line item. So that you'll see, and then also the supplies, which were part of that, will, is a huge reduction. So if you go through the whole budget, basically you see the only really increases are things had to do with our employees, our insurance, that increase there. We did have a little bit of, I put a little bit more money this year in overtime. In 2020, we budgeted for about a little over 156,000, and we spent about 150. The only reason I'm putting that in there right now, I'm not sure how the COVID year is going to go. Last year, we did have some overtime with regards to some of our sanitation workers being off, for the 2-week period with COVID. And also, we did have a couple employees that we lost last year through termination. So it ended up, a lot of the employees we're working were consuming a lot of overtime simply because we had to keep the routes going. So I'm kind of just wanted to anticipate that this year along the same. That could be, lower by the end of the year, but I'm anticipating it not being. Insurance, things like that. Some of the professional service things that you see, there's a little bit of an increase there. We don't have the money for demolition. However, what I would like to do is do as much asbestos testing as we possibly can. That way, when we are ready for any type of demolition, we have that done. We don't have the funds to go ahead with contracts this year. Right now, we're at about 25, 27 houses we're doing right now in this current contract, which will be probably getting underway as far as demolition goes, probably the middle to end of April. So by having the testing done, we do know we could take a step back and really research what properties we can actually afford to do with regards to how much asbestos is in the property. And then we would know how much it would cost to abate and take and move forward from there. So if there is any other questions, and basically all of the red that you see is a decrease in the budget that we have for right now. So if there's any other questions with that, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mike. Just quick question. With the decrease in demolition, roughly about how many less, I guess, structures are we going to be able to demolish?
Through the chair, right now we're doing our as many emergency demolition structures as we were doing before. So that there will continue basically as is. And that basically, most of those costs come out of our operating expenses. So we will continue to do that. So right now, I'll be honest with you, last year we did not quite 200 homes with regards to a contract demolition. I really anticipate this year, I'm doing 25 right now. I can't remember, and I apologize. It's either 25 or 27. But we're not going to move forward much past that until I see how the budget is going. This is the first year that we have to deal, the first full year that we have to deal with this reduction. So I really would like to get my numbers straight through the rest of the year to see where we fall. I do have a couple $100,000 that we have set aside for any emergency type demolition that comes our way with regards to any major commercial buildings or things like that we can possibly get down at the end of the year. As you know, most commercial structures we have to do through a private contractor. So that's where our costs come in at. So I would like to, save that money more towards the end of the year. When I say end of the year, anytime after September, is a good benchmark for us. So that to answer your question, yeah, it will be pretty much a significant reduction in our contract demolitions.
Thank you, Mike. Councilman Oliver.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mike. Probably 2 or 3 questions for you. How much does it cost to demolish a house by contract as opposed to from the city's department doing it?
So through the chair, our contract demolitions, obviously it's all a bid process, so there's no real exact amount. However, in the past 3 years, just for the demolition, now not including abatement, the demolitions have been around anywhere between $4,500 to $6,500 per structure per house. And then the abatements, we try to keep our abatements at a minimum the best that we can. Any house that has the abatements, we're I don't know, it could be anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 per structure on top of the demolition. So that's why I would like to do the testing right now, so that I can kind of identify ahead of time the structures that we can afford that have the the least amount of asbestos abatement that we would have to tackle. So to answer I hope that answers your question. Our our emergency demolitions, basically our costs are all involved in personnel costs and equipment costs.
So altogether it's around $8,000 to $10,000.
It could be about $8,000 to $10,000. Yeah. I'd say that's a good average, actually, Councilman, is between $8,000 and $10,000.
Okay, so second question is, since we're going to be doing less demolitions, and we've had multiple conversations about this. I
Yes.
don't, all the houses need to be torn down. Some of them can be put back in circulation. So do you think in order to save money from, contracting out demolitions, it's possible to put $5,000 into a house that could be possibly put back into recirculation, and then you could have a homeowner take over the property, utilize our remodel and tax abatement to then bring that property all the way into a home again? So have we had any conversations within your department or with the administration to kick off a project like that?
Through the chair. Yeah, actually, Councilman, that's actually, we are at that. I shouldn't say we're not there yet, but we are getting to that turning point where we are going to have to, make our, we were big on demolition there for a while, and now we have to make that turning point to rehabilitation. So we don't have the personnel in my department, the capability to determine that. However, the houses, and because there's a little bit of math involved there, obviously. But yes, we have had those talks. It is actually part of our housing strategy that I'm working on with YNDC. That's why we are doing all these neighborhood assessments. And so, yeah, we are at that point. However, getting them into the right hands, that's something that we don't have the capability to do. I know YNDC does it. We do have entities that can do that, and they have the ability to assess the property, and then based on what it would take to bring the property into compliance, and then obviously getting the right homeowners in there, somebody who's going to stay there. We don't want somebody buying it and then renting it out, and then it becomes another problem again for us in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So, and if we do get good landlords, that's a different story, but then those would have to be vetted. Yeah, to answer your question, that's something that I would like to move forward to, and that we have talked about. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I just think in order to save the city some money on demolitions and get properties recirculated into homes, I think you can utilize organizations like YNDC or Benoit, or even,
Yes.
city can help start some new organizations. There's a lot of different handymen out there and carpenters and tradesmen that I'm sure would love to be able to, partner with the city in order to get these houses up to code. And at the same time, you're creating jobs too. So just, something to think about, and we can have those conversations later.
Yes. And I through the chair, I have had conversations with regards to grants. I've been researching the grants on a constant basis. Nikki sends them to me, and we do, research to see if there's any grant money. And I have had conversations with Beverly with regards to any CDA money that may come our way to push those funds to do that. I know, we do that with YNDC right now. And we do have some funds that go to BNOI. But the trouble that we have is that, as well as I do, that, when we get complaints on a property, the longer we sit on them, the worse they get. And so what I would like to have is somebody, boom, in line, ready to go, rock and roll. Tell me, is this house worth saving or not? Are we going to get, are they going to get their money back? And what are we talking? If we're talking putting $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in a house that's, about ready to fall over, then, I don't know that, that numbers game. We have to figure out where we want to spend our money. And that's kind of, something that we all have to sit down and come up with a plan. And I would love to do that, because we are getting to that point right now. When we only have like 100,000 to 1,500 houses left in the city that are really, and not necessarily all of them have to be demolished, but some of them are at that tipping point.
Yeah, I think one of your new officers you want to add to your department, maybe hire somebody that's trained up to have that ability to assess those properties.
Absolutely. We did do that in the past, Councilman. Yes, you're right.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Through the chair.
Thank you. Yes, Samantha.
On the note that Councilman Oliver has, we've had conversations, and a lot of people in my ward have said a lot about tearing down brick homes. It makes them cringe, especially the people that move here from a city like New York, or move here from, over across the pond, and they come in and they see us tear down a brick house. They're always like, it could have been saved. So I do think it'd be really great and advantageous for the city to come alongside those organizations and try to restore some of our housing stock. But I wanted to ask, since we are not going to be doing as much demolition this year, are we increasing our efforts to boarding up and making sure the lawn care around those homes is done properly so that it doesn't make the entire neighborhood an eyesore? So how are we making sure that we work that out?
Through the chair. So as far as grass cutting goes, we have most of the vacant properties identified in the city, and we go back and we check every year. It's like a tenfold process. So we always check if the property's been assessed prior for grass cutting, how many times it's been assessed, how many years it's been assessed. And so if it's been assessed constantly, then we automatically put it on a list to be cut. If it's a complaint that goes right on the list, we go out, check it out. If it needs cut, it's cut. If not, then we don't cut it. So there's a lot of little things that go into as far as identifying any property to be cut. We are pretty well, I want to say, with our data between John Browlich at YSU and between what YNDC helps us with and what we go out and observe ourselves physically every day. We're pretty well have identified every vacant structure in the city. So yes, we do monitor them. As far as board ups go, YNDC does right now. We've been lucky the last couple of years. They have got AmeriCorps out, and they do a lot of the board up in the city. However, it's all free. We pay for the materials, but the thing is that we have to wait for them to get the free help. So sometimes you'll call for a board up, and we won't get out there for 2 to 3 weeks to get it boarded up. Depending on the safety of the structure. Now, when a structure is like opened and the floors are collapsed and we have an issue with it and we're not going to get to the demolition for quite some time, then we do get it boarded up. And I use either, any board up company that we have registered in the city. We do use them to board them up, and that does get to be costly for us. However, the costs are then borne on the owner, but it's still upfront. It's costly for us. So we try to use YNDC as much as we possibly can and AmeriCorps to get those properties boarded up. So there is a plan in place. We do it very well. They do go out and assess the neighborhoods that they are going into. They do assess it for us pretty much on a regular basis, and I probably get, I don't know how many emails a week on, can we board this up? Because I have to authorize them to board it up before they can do it. But we are trying to stay on top of that. I do understand what you mean too, because even when they're boarded up, they still look way better than in the safety issue also. I do want to comment real quick. The brick structures that you were talking about, Councilwoman, we don't tear down any brick structure unless 2 things happen. One, that it's had a previous structure fire inside, and or the floors or the foundation has collapsed. We try not to tear down good solid brick structures because really, even as a firefighter, I've been in some brick structures that have burned 2, 3, 4 times, and you can still walk in the house. So those are the only real reasons that we go out and try. We don't tear down too many brick structures other than the ones that have, like I said, have been completely destroyed to the point where the fire chief feels that it's too unsafe not to get it down.
And just one more question. Commercial demolition, how is that being affected by this cut, and how are we on the numbers in demolishing the commercial structures?
Through the chair, commercial structures have to be done private through a private contractor, and that's where our costs come in. So, and then also some commercial structures, depending on where they're at, has to go before design review. So we have to make sure that we're not, taking something out of a plan that the city has. So there's a little bit of lengthy process with regards to the commercial structures. A lot of the commercial structures we've done recently have actually been due to fire. So they actually caught fire either once or twice, and we end up having to tear them down. So, and or if there's a emergency demolition order by the fire chief, we do have a few that we've had walls falling and things like that. So we do get them taken care of right away. And that's basically all we handle as far as commercial demolition goes, because the cost is so enormous. for us. We would have to, most structures with abatement, we're looking anywhere over $50,000 just to start. So that's basically the last 3 years, how we've been handling some of our commercial demolitions.
Thank
And we
you.
have done a couple on Market Street. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. We have done a couple on Market Street that have a low asbestos count in them. So we were able to get them down through a contract a couple years ago.
Thank you, Mike. Councilman McNally.
Thanks. Just real quick, under going back to the actual budget here under equipment.
Yes.
I see is the budget for this year, the 346, is that for something new, or are we paying on, I know we bought like another truck recently. Is that
through the chair? Yes,
that's
through the chair. No, that's through the chair. You're correct. That's the truck we just purchased. It was just on legislation and just went through border control. It's for a new sanitation truck.
Okay,
we're gonna start replacing our feet. Yes,
yep,
we're about.
If it was in addition to that or covering that one. So, all right, thank you.
Nope, that's it.
And Mike, I have a quick question as well. Looking at the payroll employee list, what exactly is the rehab assistant one?
Through the chair, that's like our demo ground supervisor. She's the one that's goes out and takes the pictures of all the demolitions and does all of our like final grades. When she has to meet the contractors there, when we do contract demolition, she has to go out and observe the asbestos abatement being removed and documenting the asbestos removal and things like that.
Okay. All right. Thank
She
you
does
for that
the contract.
clarification.
She prepares the contracts for demolition and all of that stuff. So
Thank you. Are there any other questions from any of my colleagues? It doesn't appear like it. So thank you, Mike. So that seems to be everything on today's budget review. So the next order of business is to announce the next hearing, which is set for next Tuesday, March 9th at 4 p.m. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion to adjourn.